Hey, this is Paul Lathrop from the Polite Society Podcast, reminding you that this podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the other great podcasts on the network at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, President of the Non-Threat Assassination Squad, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. This is a podcast about the men and women who compete in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Now, I've been attending IDPA matches since 2011, and over the years, I've met some really amazing people thanks to this sport. Ignore all the colorful jerseys and the sponsor logos, and underneath you're going to find everyday men and women who volunteer their time and their effort and spend their hard-earned dollars on travel, match fees, and gear to make this sport great. And today you're going to meet another one of these awesome people. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor. Before we get started, let me tell you about GlockTriggers.com. Love them or hate them, the one thing you know about Glock pistols is that they are reliable. Out of the box, to the range, absolutely reliable. It's what makes them so popular with competitors, law enforcement, military, and responsible armed citizens. But one of the drawbacks is that stock trigger. Well, Jeff Wilson and the folks at Glock Triggers asked themselves, how do we make them better while maintaining reliability? Using stock parts as their foundation, they've refined the interaction of the metal parts to give you smoother take-up, a cleaner break, and reduced overtravel without sacrificing safety or reliability. Recommended and used by people like Bob Vogel, Travis Haley, and Ken Hackathorn, Glock Triggers custom trigger kits come with a lifetime warranty and a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. Visit them today at GlockTriggers.com and check out the Edge, the Vogel, the Skimmer, the Guardian, and the Hackathorn trigger systems. Use the promo code from this podcast, USC20, and save 20% off of your entire order. GlockTriggers.com. The highest quality drop-in trigger system for your Glock. Our special guest today is Seth Hayden from Prattville, Alabama. Seth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us a little about yourself, about what you do for a living there in Prattville.
I am an IT administrator for a small company. We do IT work for businesses, usually under 50 employees that don't have their own dedicated IT staff. Been doing that for 20 years, straight out of college. I fell in love with breaking computers. I kept breaking my dad's and had to figure out how to fix them. And I thought, if I'm going to keep breaking it, I need to learn how to fix it. It just went from there.
Turn the childhood hobby into a career.
Yep, exactly. And amazingly, that's how I got into shooting. I'd always enjoyed guns. My granddad has 300 acres south of where I live. And so when my brother and I were young, I mean, we spent every weekend up there riding four-wheelers and shooting, 22s and BB guns and everything growing up. And then I really didn't do anything with guns. I didn't hunt a whole lot. And one of my clients had told me, he said, a friend of mine keeps bugging me to shoot this thing called IDPA. And he said, but I don't want to get out there and self-embarrass myself. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll go with you because you're not going to be any worse than me. And that way, at worst, I'm embarrassing myself. And so I read up on it a little bit. I was like, I can do this. And at the time, all I had was in a pistol format was a 40 cal pistol. And I went to an event at a gun show. It was their anniversary. And they had Smith & Wesson there doing free trigger jobs. And they had the M&P line. And they had a really good sale on it. And I thought, I'm going to save money just in ammo costs if I buy a 9mm. So I bought a pistol for IDPA and had not shot a match yet. And I thought, well, clearly I've got to shoot a local match and find out if I want to do this before I sign up for a state match. I was just, hey, I'm probably, I don't want to jinx myself, but I'm probably going to like this thing. I mean, it's shooting guns. How bad can it be? Thankfully, I had a really good SO. I didn't do anything extremely stupid, but I was clearly not the best out there. And they're like, yeah, we got a state match coming up. I'm like, yeah, I got to get classified. And they're like, we'll throw a classifier in a couple of weeks. So I shot 2 local matches and they had a classifier. I did not properly review the rules of the classification. I thought, it'd be cool if I could shoot this thing and be sharpshooter. That'd be awesome, And I got there, and it was the 90 round classifier, and I shot it as good as I could do it. And I made sharpshooter by 0.5 seconds. Now, this was back in 2012 when it was a half a point per second down. And the assistant match director looked at the score sheet and said, I can probably find a down one that y'all missed on the score sheet. And I didn't understand what he meant by that. And I was like, it is what it is. If I'm not competitive in sharpshooter, I'll reclassify as marksman. And he said, okay. And he walked off. And so I shot 2 local matches. I signed up for the state match, and they talked me into it because I had such a boisterous personality here. They said, you can help work it. Even though you're not an SO, we have things you can do to help work the match. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm game. They never refunded me my match fee. They kept that, but I enjoyed it. Yeah,
We got us a
exactly.
sucker.
They felt that line pop, and they yanked hard, and boy, I bit down on that hook. So I helped work the match, and I showed up with all the SOs to shoot it. And 3 stages in, I was like, why am I shooting so bad? I mean, I'm more points down 3 stages in than I am at a regular match. I mean, I hadn't shot a whole lot of local matches, but this is really bad. And they're like, no, you don't understand. A state match is on a different level. And I'm like, yeah, I know there's 10 stages instead of 6. And they're like, no, it's on a different level. I'm like, yeah, I still don't get it. And so I was a lot of points down. And everybody in sharpshooter was pretty safe from, me getting a bump. And I just couldn't understand it. I told my wife, I just had a bad day. And it finally hit me. No, the state matches and the local matches are 2 different things. But I was hooked.
Yep.
And then, my wife was like, okay, yeah, once a month I can live with this. This is good. And then my buddy Skip and I are like, we really like this. We're going to go to Mississippi and shoot the Mississippi State match. And my wife's like, I don't understand. You're a resident of Alabama. And I was like, yeah, but they have their own match. And she goes, yeah, for Mississippi. I'm like, it's not like that. It's not like, high school football where you win the state championship and that's it. I said, this is kind of them hosting a match to represent Mississippi. And she's like, yeah, I don't get it. I'm like, just trust me. And she's like, whatever. So, we went to the Mississippi match and had fun. We went to when Georgia had a match. We went to the Georgia match and had fun. And it took, I don't know, two or 3 years. And then finally I said, I really got to do more than count the local matches as practice. I ought to try something like dry fire, or at least show up to the club that I'm a member of outside of a match and throw some rounds downrange. And it finally hit me. I can't remember if it was 15 or 16. It finally hit me. I started practicing a little, and I just couldn't get out of sharpshooter. I would try and try and try. And the funny thing is, I'd do really good at the local matches, and then I'd go to a sanction match, and I just have one stage. You always you go back and look and go, if we could just do a mulligan on that stage,
Right.
we'd be doing good. I finally get better and better and better, and I practice a little bit, and everybody's like, you need to finally bump up to expert. You're shooting with all the experts. You need to bump up to expert. I'm like, I am trying. And I'd shoot that 90 round classifier, and I couldn't get there. I'd always be like 2 seconds short of making it. So the state match comes up. I'm shooting it as an SO, and I do decent. I mean, I set a decent time. This was back with paper score, so it wasn't like practice score where you could see where you needed to go.
Right.
So I run the shooters and everything, and the scores come out. And turns out I did pretty good. I beat the second place sharpshooter guy by 35 seconds. And I beat everybody in expert except for one guy. And
Wow.
the guy in expert was like, that DA sandbagger, he just wanted a trophy. I'm like, look, and as God is my witness, I tried to get into expert. And so again, with me misinterpreting the rules, I take that bump to expert, and I practice that summer. And Skip and I go to Mississippi, and I just try as hard as I can. And back then I could run pretty fast because half a point. I could outrun the points a little bit.
Right.
And so everybody else changes divisions when they get a bump and then get a bump in another division. Not me, crazy me. I run up full force, and lo and behold, I get a bump to master in SSP from expert. And I'm thinking, yeah. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Now I'm expert in all the other divisions. I could have played around as a sharpshooter in ESP, but no, I had to, go for it. I was like, well, there's that. So finally, a buddy of mine, Skip, is like, we should shoot our carry guns one day. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And so we show up to the classifier to shoot the classifier. This is before CCP, and he's got it inside the waistband, and he's shooting a Glock 26.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, it's the spirit of IDPA. I'm like, you're trying to avoid getting a bump on the classifier. He's like, no, no, no. Like, yeah, I know what you're doing. So we hop up along. Well, then concealed carry comes out, and I'm like, that's going to be me. I don't have to be a master anymore. I can be an expert and pretend. And so I shoot that, and I'm still having that one stage that just bugs you. Like, whether it's the first stage, you got the first stage jitters, or you just don't read a stage right or something. So we go to Boone, North Carolina last year, and I'm
Mhm.
really just practicing for nationals because I shoot a Walther, and Walter's got that Walther money. And look, I know I'm not as competitive as some. I'm not just there yet. I don't have the time to devote to it. But I'm
Right.
like, CCP expert, they'll pay for second place. I might could look up and get in that. And, if I look up and get in first, there's a big payout. I'm like, awesome. So, I'm going to Boone, North Carolina. There's 6 people signed up. I'm good. I don't have to worry about anything. And I get there, and Dan Humphreys is there, and he's a CCP master. So I'm like, I don't even have to worry about this. He's got CCP in the bag. I can just have fun. So I don't even look at how many people show up on the day of to shoot. And they still do the printed score sheets, and so they post up the score sheets, and half the scores are posted. And I look, and with half the times there, I'm like, I've got half a chance of beating Dan. That's pretty cool.
Right.
And so they finally post the scores, and I was like, oh, cool, I beat Dan. And then it hits me, wait a minute. With Dan, there's 11 of them. And this is, right before nationals. And I'm like, well, there went
Mhm.
any
Oh,
option of a payout. And so it was actually 2 weeks before nationals that they finally uploaded my score to bump me up. And so I could pretend that I was still expert. And then I was like, maybe they won't upload it to after nationals, and I don't know, I don't think I could ethically get by. I'd have to tell someone, but I was like, I could at least pretend. And so finally they uploaded the score. And I'm like, yep, there goes any chance there.
so you keep accidentally swimming in the big, and you keep moving up to the bigger pools every time without actually swimming around and enjoying like marksman. How long was it before it occurred to you that I probably should have?
So for bug, everybody got the universal classification when they came out with the division. I was sharpshooter at the time that they came out with it. And so I got marksman. And so I've been riding it. I hadn't shot bug. And so we're going to shoot a match in Mississippi. And I was joking with Skip. I was like, I'm going to run it marksman. I mean, why not?
Why not?
And he's like, it's kind of cheating. I'm like, yeah, but is it really? I mean, they gave me the classification. I got a bug gun, and it's a carry gun, and I've probably put 50 rounds through it outside just to shoot, to make sure the gun shoots. And it's a little
Mhm.
Walther P99C compact, and I'll be honest, it almost doesn't fit in the box. It's snug. Matter of fact, the mags with the pinky extension will not fit in the box. You have to file them down, and I filed them down until it barely fits. Or if not, I'll just step back and rub the mag on the concrete a little bit and step back up to inspection.
It'll fit now.
Yeah, it'll fit now. Which funny thing, my 4-inch Walther, it doesn't have any problem fitting in the box anymore because 2 years ago, before nationals, I was going to fly out to nationals 2 years ago with a friend of mine, and we were going to SO. And so we were flying out Monday, and it was a Sunday, and my club was doing a classifier. And I was
Mhm.
like, guys, I'm not shooting a classifier. I've learned not to be stupid. I was like, I'm not shooting a classifier, but I'll run out and I'm going to shoot some rounds down range, and I'll help y'all run it. I'll just SO it.
Right.
So it's a beautiful day, and my wife's like, you should take your motorcycle. I'm like, I think I might. I strap my bag on the back. I've got my 5-inch gun in there. I've got my 4-inch gun in there. I've got 9 magazines. I've just got everything. It's a full bag. I strap it down. I check everything. I do the typical, well, that's not going anywhere routine. And I drive to lunch, and I get out. I eat lunch. I come back. I check it. It all seems good. I get on the interstate. I'm rocking along. And about every mile, I just reach back on my left hand and check. And it's there. It's not moving at all. And I even take a sharp turn as I change interstates. And it's a 45-minute ride to the range. And so I get more than halfway there, and I'm cruising along at a good clip. I mean, and I reach behind myself and I check, and the bag is shifted over.
Oh,
And, you know, my internal voice says, I need to stop and adjust that because it's moved over some.
right.
And that's how far down the road I got. And I see in the mirror, it just falls off the side of the bike and starts rolling down the interstate.
Oh,
And so I'm thinking, great, that's awesome. So I'm thinking it's a goner. And so I slowly slow down and stop and pull off the road. I didn't slam on brakes. I just pulled over. There's no one behind me. I pull over and I look back, and the bag is completely intact in one piece. And I'm thinking, oh, I got lucky. This is good. So I take off my helmet and I start running up the interstate, and cars are swerving around it. And I'm thinking, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I get up to where I'm perpendicular to the bag, where I can run out to the interstate and grab it all in one piece
oh God.
and bring it back safely off the road. And I look up, and an F-250 is coming down the road.
Oh,
So I step back from the interstate so that he can choose to go right or left around the bag. I mean, I'm giving him options. I'm being courteous.
right.
And he, being the enterprising Southerner he is like, buddy, I'm in an F-250. This thing is sitting high off the ground. Not only do I see your bag at 80 miles an hour, I'm going to center up over it and just drive over it and not even touch it. That's how nice of an individual I am. I'm not going to swerve. I'm not going to risk hitting you. We're all good. And that plan worked out beautifully until the axle on the rear of the truck caught the handle of the bag
Oh God.
and yanked it down the interstate.
Oh no.
And it ripped the bag in half, threw it up in the air, and
Oh.
300 rounds of ammo spread out over 4 lanes of interstate.
Oh my goodness.
It was a beautiful sound. I mean, aside from the heart-wrenching part that I loaded the ammo and now it's spread all over the interstate, it sounded beautiful. So I run out there, I grab what's left of the bag, and I pull it over to the side of the interstate, and I look in the bag. Of course, no ammo's in there, but no guns are in there.
Oh no.
There's no magazine. There's one magazine in there.
Oh
So I
no.
look up, and I see the pistol bag, you know, the little insert.
Yep.
And so I run out there and I grab that and I feel it, and there's one gun in there. And I'm like, okay. So I run back to the side of the interstate for a car to run by. And when a car runs by, you wouldn't think, being on the interstate and cars whizzing by, that you'd hear this, but I can hear the sound a gun makes when it rattles, you know, when it tips from the frame to the slide. You know how some of them will tip up a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And I look up, and my 5-inch wall through is sitting on a painted line in the interstate, just wobbling from the wind. So I go out there and grab it, and I find 2 mags, and I bring them back to the side of the road. And one of the mags still has ammo in it, but the top round has been filed down where it has slid down the interstate. So I'm going to be completely honest with you. I ejected it from the mag and left it with all its brothers and sisters. I was like, you know, what's one round at this point?
Right.
I get my 5-inch gun, and I look at it, and the rear sight is gone, and the front sight,
Oh.
fiber optic rod front sight, is still there, uncracked.
Wow.
But the metal part of it has been filed down, and it's shiny silver on the top. And I'm like, great. Well, now, you know, I'm like Billy the Kid. I file down my front sight so I can, you know, have a faster draw or something.
Right.
And so I start walking back to my motorcycle, and I'm finding magazines as I go. Over 150 feet of interstate, I surprisingly find all my magazines. So I've got a problem now because my bag is not a complete bag. It's pieces. So
Right.
I do the best I can of tying it back together. Now, all of this, not a single person has stopped, which is kind of good because I've got 300 rounds of ammo spread out on the interstate. And I don't know what littering charges, you know, where it starts and stops, but I'm pretty sure ammo is on the list. And so finally I get the bag where I want it, and a sheriff's deputy stops up the road. And so I just give him a thumbs up and wave him on. I'm thinking, I don't want you back here, because at some point you might say, we need to pick up all this ammo. And I'm like, but do we? And so at some point it'll sweep off to the side of the road. And so the problem I have now is I am 15 minutes from the range, but I'm 30 minutes from the house. I don't have any ammo. And the gun I'm flying to Texas with tomorrow, I don't know if the sights are true or not. I mean, it just took a tumble down the interstate. And so I had to drive up to the next exit, and the whole time I'm going like barely the speed limit with my hand on the bag, like I'm holding it with dear life. And I get back home, my wife says, "Thought you were going to the range."
Funny you should mention that.
My bag fell off the bike. She's like, "Do what?" And I'm like, "Yeah, if it would happen, it happened to me." So I run out to the shop and crank out 100 rounds real quick because I'm thinking, I don't even know if the gun fires. I don't know if the mags will feed ammo. I don't know. I'll load everything up into this broken bag and I throw it in the trunk of my car. Not going to trust the motorcycle at this point. And I drive out to the range, and surprisingly, all the mags feed. Even the gun with no sights still functions. It's just scratched up real bad. And I never got that out of my head at nationals. The whole time I'm thinking this gun's going to break at some point, but it functioned just fine.
You're now the state coordinator for Alabama as well. Am I right about that?
Yeah. The funny thing about that, so we lost our area coordinator, and we were going to they had talked about a new area coordinator, and then they talked about us falling under Rick Lund and having a state coordinator. And I was like, I don't know if I'm the best fit for it, but I called 3 people and I was like, "Hey, I think we ought to put your name in the hat." And they all came up with whatever excuse. I've got young kids, I've got my work schedule, but every one of them says, "But honestly, Seth, you'd make a great state coordinator." And, after the first one said it, I said, "Ha ha, yeah, yeah, yeah." And the second one, I was like, "Y'all are all conspiring here." And so when the third one did it, I was like, "All right, fine." So this year at Nationals, I helped with the match there. So if anybody is mad about the standards and the 31 flagrant penalties, that is the only stage that I designed. I designed that stage. And I thought in my head it would be a great stage because every time you shoot standards, it's boring. Our home club, Central Alabama Gun Club, we have our match director is kind of brilliant in a way. He's just come up with these pneumatic targets, and through trial and elimination, he's perfected them, and they work off an electronic eye, and he's built a little box. They run off a battery, and we run them off CO2, and so you don't need power, you don't need air compressors, you don't need anything like a containment unit. And because the computer is controlling the presentation time and the disappearing time, they're extremely consistent. And as long as your air pressure is good, they're always the exact same. And so I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 3 targets for weekend, and then you're going to run over here and we're going to have appearing targets. And you're going to have to shoot them strong hand only. And it sounds simple enough. And it really was. And then the evil genius that I am, I thought, what? I'm going to set it up so the presentation time is just long enough for expert master shooters to get them. And then everybody else, they're going to disappear on you, and you're going to have to wait till they reappear. And so I came up with the time of 3.3 seconds. And the reason I came up with that time, because in your head, you say it's 3 seconds, but you go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Where are they? And then finally they appear. It wasn't technically difficult, but the fact that when you ran through the electronic eye, all 3 of them popped out instantaneously. And usually you shoot a piece of steel to activate something, and nothing activates this. They just appear. It scared everybody. Literally a third of the people, well, maybe not quite a third, but on Thursday, 2 people out of every squad, on average, panicked and grabbed the gun with both hands and cleaned the array. And they did, down 0. It was beautiful. And we had discussed this during the stage walkthrough. They said, "What if someone shoots it freestyle? It's a procedural, right?" And we're thinking, yeah, but isn't that's kind of cheating to do it that way? And they said, "How long's the reset time?" And I said, 3.3 seconds. And they said, "Well, if you save 3 seconds with an infraction, it's a flagrant because you've got an advantage." And I'm like, dang it, technically you're right. Yeah, it's a flagrant. And we're like, okay, yeah, but no one's going to do it. And so 2 SOs did it, and we're like, okay, yeah, I kind of see that. Well, then on Thursday, I became a rule breaker because after the AMDs and the MDs got called to that stage 5 times in the morning before 2 squads got approved.
Gosh.
And the reason being because flagrants have to be approved by the match director. They basically told the CSO, "Look, if it's a flagrant for this infraction, mark it and move on. it's approved, because it was happening so much. And we thought, that's kind of funny and cruel at the same time. And the numbers kept counting up, and we're like, surely people are going to learn. No, they didn't. They just kept doing it. And then I did not design all the stages. I laid them all out in SketchUp, because I had the bays marked up in SketchUp, so we could lay the stages out and see if there were any shoot throughs and if the size of the stage could fit in the bays. But Chad gave me the order that I don't want people leaning out on one foot and risking falling over to shoot a target. So it had to be safe for a 4'5" shooter or something. And so we used a good number of non-threats. And so Anthony, the stats guy, comes to me after Thursday, and he's like, I don't want to jinx us. I've never seen a match go to 500 non-threats, and we have a chance. And so a guy was standing there, and he goes, they cannot hit that many non. He goes, it's not that hard of shots. And he goes, oh, wait, I hit 3. Maybe it is. So it became a game with the stats guy. He'd come by and he'd be like, we're at 380. And he'd come back, we're at 410. Well, then we passed 500. And he's like, could we really get to 6? So we started taking bets with people. It was almost a challenge, We're at 650. We're at 675.
Oh, wow.
So we stopped north of 800.
Wow. You mentioned earlier several people asked you or told you, hey, you would make a good state coordinator.
Yeah.
Was that just because they think you're a sucker, or because?
Yeah. It didn't have anything to do with me being a rule follower or analytical, because I am, partly anarchist. Like, I like to break rules that don't make sense. I believe in rules as long as everybody else follows them. And so they all thought, I'd be great for that. I don't know why. I'm not a great. I'm a simplistic communicator. Like, I'll email you once and say, hey, here's the date. I'm not the guy that emails you every day. Hey, the match is coming up. Hey, the match is coming up. I think you're an adult. Maybe a reminder the day before the match. But so I don't know if they're going to look for more in a state coordinator than that. But it is what it is. I don't mind doing it, and I love helping the sport out. I think the sport's great. Like I said, there's rules you may not agree with, but if everybody has to follow the same rule, then it's, in your eye,
as long as the rules are equally applied.
As long as the rules are equally applied, exactly. It's an even playing ground. But so
two more questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
One fun and one kind of, the usual ending question. The first one is one that it's an odd question. Most people have really mundane answers, so it's kind of boring. But every now and then, people come up with something interesting. Is there something, especially after your experience with bag on a motorcycle?
Oh yeah.
Is there something in your gun bag, in your range bag, besides the standard stuff, that you always make sure that you take to the range to a match, and why?
So I have shot 2 USPSA matches. I shot a local match, and I shot one that's technically a real USPSA sanctioned match, but they call it the end of year summer blast, and they don't have any non-threats, so it's not a real USPSA match, I guess, in that sense. There weren't any classifier stages. There wasn't anything like that. It's just let's have fun, guys. But my first, I bought my 5-inch Walther, of course, and I shot it for a while with the factory sights, and I had a piece of steel that it had a bad time with, which sometimes steel is my enemy. I mean, and the funny thing is I answered a question for nationals. A guy looked at the stages, and he's like, there's too many non-threats on the stage. And the rule, if you read it in the rule book, says 1 non-threat for every 2 non-threats. And then it gives an example. If there's 1 to 2 targets, you can have 1 non-threat. If there's 3 to 4, you can have 2. So really the way I read it, because I'm a rule follower, and I always try to find the gray area, but I adhere to the rule. If you have 1 target, you can have 1 non-threat. If you have 3 targets, you have 2 non-threats. Is the way I read it. It does say for every 2 example. Yep. So we had a stage that had 9 targets. So in my mind, you can have five non-threats. And so we had 5 non-threats. And in his mind, he was thinking you needed 10 to have 5 because it's for every 2. And so He
Right.
posted on Facebook, "There's too many non-threats." And I asked a friend, "How do I answer this without sounding a little over?"
Right.
And he said, "Just refer to the rule." So I said, "See this rule? It's correct." And he's like, "No, it's for every 2 targets. There's only." And at first he said there's only 8 targets. He didn't count the steal. And so I answered,
Hmm.
"Though I am not always a threat to a steal target, a steal target is always a threat to the shooter." So remembering that, my first USPSA match, I ordered a set of Dawson Precision fiber optic sights for my Walther. And if anybody owns a Walther, the rear sight is super easy to remove. And there's probably instructions somewhere that says use Loctite. I'm not one to read instructions. I call them destruction manuals. So I put the sights on this gun, and I go on and on the third stage of the match, I shoot at a target. And instead of seeing a little red dot, I'm seeing a really wide fiber optic rod because my front sight is turned 90 degrees. Now, it could have turned any angle, but it turned exactly 90 degrees. And so I thought, wow, this shot might not be spot on because from this angle, it's wider than the target, but I'll see what I can do. So I fired off a round and it turned back square and I could see again. And so I got to the next target and I fired, and lo and behold, it did it again. And so I finished the stage every other shot having sights. And so at the time, my backup gun was my M&P. So I went back and got my M&P out and finished the match. And so I always carry Loctite. I have never had to use it since then because I put it on my sights when I get them. I make sure of that, but I keep Loctite in my bag for that reason. It's been, I don't know, 5 years. I've never had to use it. I've loaned it out to people that have needed it for something, but I carry it now. So that's the oddball thing that I carry, and the reason I carry it because of my own personal experience.
That's perfectly logical. All right. What is it about, you've taken on these different roles. Like you said, you jumped right into, from shooting a couple of matches to going to a state match right off the bat, and jumped right into sharpshooter and didn't even think about swimming around with
Yeah.
in the kids pool first. You've become involved in the nationals, designing stages, and assistant match director, and now state coordinator. What is it about IDPA that you love so much that you devote this kind of time and effort to it?
I'll tell you what it is. And I played sports growing up, and sports are extremely competitive, and you're always trying to beat the other guy. Even team sports, you're still trying to beat the other guy on your team, even because if they cut a player, they're going to cut the worst player. So you've got to be better than the guy next to you because you don't want to get cut. But at the first match you go to as a new shooter, and you don't have a clue, you can walk up to anybody in your squad and ask them a question. And it can be the question, "How do I beat you?" And they will give you the honest answer and the most tips they can come. I mean, they will basically run to dry mouth telling you how you as a shooter can beat them as a shooter. And to me, that's what makes this sport the best, is that everybody is super helpful, because even though we're all competing against each other to be at the top of practice score or to get the wooden plaque, we still believe that the sport is for the betterment of yourself, for personal skills, that we're willing to sacrifice our win to help out the guy next to us to make him better. And so I have never seen a shooter, go up to another shooter and say, "Hey, why did you do this?" And that person go, just snub their nose and walk off. They'll say, "Hey, I'll tell you why. This is why I do this. This is why I did this." And if you ask them, "I noticed, my time was twice yours. What can I do to do better?" They'll, and I do the same thing. I'll pull a new shooter aside and I'll say, "Okay, here's how you shot this stage. Here's what I want you to focus on. This is where your deficiency is. Your number one deficiency is. This is what we've got to work on." And to me, that is the heart of the sport, is the fact that we're brothers and sisters in something bigger than just the sport. Is self-betterment. And obviously we agree that there's a self-defense application to the gun. We can argue whether or not the stages are real self-defense scenarios, or if this is real life, if a match is considered training or not. But we all recognize that going out there, we're making ourselves better for the sport, and it has an application outside of the match itself. If it's self defense, confidence, or whatever you're applying that to, even outside of just the gun, it gives the shooter self confidence in other areas of their life that they achieve outside of that, and that is the sport. I mean, that's what's kept it going through good and bad rule changes. That's what's kept it going all these years. Whether you don't like a match director or you don't like an SO's call, you realize that this sport is about the guy in your squad and you and him together or her together getting better through it. And that's why, I mean, my first match, I was just outside of the shooting, because I can go to the range myself and set up a stage and shoot it myself, but I don't get any of, and whether it's smack talk from my friends that tell me, why on earth did you miss that target? Did you forget about that? My favorite thing is when you're running timer and your buddy misses a target and you get to say, if you're done shooting. Because when you hear that, you're gonna, well, what did I forget? Oh yeah, I got extra rounds. Yeah, I've got extra rounds. Where did they not go? So, just that camaraderie, that to me, that's the heart of the sport.
Well, Seth, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Thank you so much for what you're doing for the sport, and I look forward to running into you, hopefully squadding with you down the road.
Oh, absolutely. I look forward to it.
All right, I want to thank today's guest for coming on the show and sharing his story. He was very generous with his time, and the interview ran longer than normal. So if you would like to hear the full-length interview, join us on Patreon, and you'll get access to all the extra content. You could hear the rest of the interview, plus full-length interviews from guests like Bob Vogel and Julie Golub. Sign up for just $1 a month to support the show, and you get access to all these special episodes at unloadpodcast.com/extra. Thank you again for listening. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.